All right, welcome to Unconditional, my new podcast. I'm thankful that you're all listening in. And we've got Lorne Shuman with us today. Lorne is the man, real estate lawyer extraordinaire. Lorne has helped our office many, many times. He's come in, he's given courses. He is the go-to when we need knowledge. So, Lorne, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm fumbling my way through these things, trying to figure it out. So you'll bear with me as we get through this. So I looked you up. Obviously, I never have in the past. Oddly enough, you went to the University of Windsor.
I did.
How was that?
It was a long time ago. It's hard to remember
what
it was like.
Was the casino there when you were there?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
No.
I think you were before that. My brother-in-law actually went to the University of Windsor
Mm-hmm.
A couple of my other friends as well. So all I know about Windsor is the casino and the Tunnel Barbecue, which is no longer there.
It's no longer there.
It's
Really?
no longer there. Yeah, out of
I
business.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
I frequented that occasionally.
I'm sure. I used to bring back cases of their barbecue sauce.
Yeah.
So, I'll jump in with some questions.
Sure.
Everybody's freaking out right now. At least a lot of agents are freaking out. We're trying to keep people calm.
Mm-hmm.
What are you noticing in your business? Have you noticed a change in volume? Like, what are you seeing out there?
Definitely a drop in volume. As a real estate lawyer, we get a lot of our business obviously from real estate agents,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of business comes from previous clients. But we've definitely seen a drop in volume, and generally speaking, we lag behind you. So
Of course.
if you guys say we're really, really busy now, we know that in 30 or 60 days, we're going to have a lot of closings. If you say you're not selling or buying anything, we know that we're not going to see anything. I mean, we've definitely seen a drop in volume, but we've been through these ups and downs before, as I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
That's just the way the market is. When there's in my experience, when there's a shock to the system, everybody freaks out, like you said, and everybody goes into panic mode, and then it becomes normal, and people just adjust
It balances out.
and go back to the way things were before.
Yeah, you say you're 30 days behind us. It's the press is like 60 to 90 days behind all of us.
Right.
And I found that June and July were absolutely horrible months.
Okay.
I found that deals just dropped off completely,
Mm-hmm.
and August started to pick up again, which gave us all hope. I think we saw a normalization in August where people sort of settled in. Sellers realized that they weren't going to get $3 million for a $2 million house, and buyers weren't going to get a $2 million house for $1 million. But then September sort of fell off a cliff again.
Mm-hmm.
And then October was an excellent month again.
Really?
So I haven't seen anything exactly like that. Are you seeing parallels?
It's
to that?
I mean, I would say that we are, like I said, we're seeing a drop in volume, but we still are keeping busy somehow. I mean, part of our practice that is a growing part is the wills and estates part of our practice.
Right.
I don't know if it was due to COVID, the pandemic, but everybody seems to want to get their estate done
In order.
and have wills, which is a good thing.
Sure.
So that part of our practice has really dramatically increased. Real estate has been, it was the last couple of years was insanity, as you know, and now it's just kind of steadied, but definitely volumes are down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what the coming year brings.
Yeah.
The press is no help.
No.
It's certainly not as bad as the press makes it out. And as a brokerage owner, prices don't really affect us all that much. The most
Right.
important thing is that deals are getting
Volume.
done.
Yeah. I mean, you were asking about pet peeves in terms of mistakes that agents make. I would draw that parallel to mistakes that lawyers can make. One of the biggest problems in terms of claims against lawyers is not necessarily a lack of knowledge of the law. It's inadequate communication and inadequate investigation. And that probably is this. There's a parallel between that and real estate lawyers or any lawyers and real estate agents as well. It's not going deeper, asking questions, and just accepting what's given to you and not probing a little bit more. Because generally, when you do that, you will uncover things that could lead to problems that could be avoided right at the outset.
For sure. So one of my pet peeves, I guess, with a lot of real estate lawyers, not yourself,
Yeah.
and I know that you have a history. You worked for a title insurance company
Yeah.
for a large part of your
did.
career. So, when I look back in my memory, title insurance really became a big thing, 20 years ago? Right towards the beginning of my career.
Yeah, early 90s.
And at that point, there became a big shift with real estate lawyers.
In what way?
The level of investigation, the level of work that they did dropped off.
Yeah.
They just rely on title insurance.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Initially, when title insurance came in, lawyers didn't understand it. And a lot of them feared it and thought this was kind of the beginning of the end of the real estate lawyers. That really wasn't the intent. The intent of the title insurance companies was to supplement the work that the lawyer did and ultimately give the buyer additional protection. But unfortunately, some lawyers took the position that, well, if we get title insurance, we don't have to do anything, and kind of just say, well, if there's a problem, let the title insurance company. I mean, you're not serving your client by doing that, and it made some lawyers lazy, and ultimately led to problems that they were faced with down the road.
Yeah, I completely spot that. So, what do you think?
Yeah.
In most cases, like I'll sum it up for you. You get a new buyer client, let's say, as a real estate agent.
Yeah.
They come in, you have a discussion, you talk about their financing, you talk about obviously what they're looking for, you begin the process, you start showing them properties, eventually you get to an offer stage, you make an offer for them, blah, blah, blah. The lawyer has not come into the equation. It hasn't even been discussed at this point.
No.
So what do you feel is the best point to bring a lawyer into the discussion?
As early as possible. I mean, I would say that in 99% of the cases, we don't contact the client or have any contact with the client until the deal is done.
Right.
Okay. That's just the way it's always been done. A little bit different when you're buying from a builder. Now, I think what you're getting is, should you have the lawyer involved at an earlier stage?
Yeah.
You can.
Like I remember my dad. My dad. I'm sure you've done deals with my dad at some point in the past, and he's very particular. Like when I started in the business, when we even prepared let's say we're acting for a seller, the sample offers that we would prepare went to the lawyer to review before we even put them out there.
Never happens.
I know.
It never happens. The only time it would happen if there was an issue and the agent maybe alerted to the client, before we do this, we should have a lawyer look at it.
Bless it.
Yeah, but that just doesn't happen anymore. I don't know why.
It's cheap. People don't want to spend the money.
People don't. Yeah, I know, but what's the expression? What is it?
Penny wise, pound foolish. Or
I mean,
like
people
that.
don't want to spend money, but it never makes sense to me when you're selling your biggest asset for $2 or $3 million. For
sure.
To try to save a couple $100. I never understood that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But it is the reality. So, one thing we got to, I guess, start training our agents to do is because most first-time buyers aren't going to have a lawyer, right? Their parents might have a lawyer.
Yeah.
They might know who they're going to use, but they haven't had a discussion until last minute. I mean, it almost seems that we should get lawyers involved in that first meeting when we're having the discussion on financing. How does it work? So if somebody comes to you and they say, Lorne, I'm buying my first place, do you have an initial consultation?
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah, we do. One of the things that I absolutely insist on is that when a client is referred to us, whether we get them from an agent, whether we get them off Google, we have a form where we ask them questions. Real simple questions like your name, your date of birth, your address, contact information. And then we dig a little bit deeper and say, okay, what are you buying? What's the closing date? Who are you getting your mortgage from? Is the property owned? Is the property tenanted? Are you a first-time buyer? Are you a Canadian citizen? Are you a permanent resident? Whole bunch of questions that are designed to elicit information from them that could uncover potential problems.
For sure, for the agent as well.
And I insist that that's done by a lawyer, usually me or another lawyer in my firm, because with our experience, we're going to be able to identify potential problems. And then it's amazing that what you can uncover in a quick conversation. I'm trying to think of some examples off the top of my head, I mean, in problems that I've seen. But even if it's an initial conversation, sometimes I'll have the agreement, and I may go over the agreement and ask some questions. Well, what is this? Why was this in the agreement? And that will eventually lead to uncovering problems that can kill a closing.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing, incidentally, a lot of closings bail right now? Are you seeing deals not close?
Not as much as we saw in the summer. Okay. In the summer, we had a number of them. Everybody did, and those are not fun. I can tell you, they're no fun for anybody because nobody wins when our client is selling and the buyer needs an extension or the buyer can't close.
Sure.
You got a very frustrated seller because they haven't done anything wrong.
Of course.
And just by circumstance. I mean, they are going to get screwed because even if they win, they lose.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand the mechanics of what happens when a deal falls apart, and they often have unrealistic expectations in terms of what they're going to get. And we have to level set with them and say, unfortunately, this is the way it works. Yeah. We'll do everything we can to protect you, but there's not much we can.
There are so many misconceptions out there about what happens when a deal goes south. Mm-hmm. Sellers all think they instantly get the deposit.
Yeah, that's the biggest misconception.
For sure.
Yeah.
I was going to... I lost my train of thought. But... I would love to explain, because when I have meetings, when we have our sales meetings with our agents and we're talking about the do's and don'ts and what can go wrong, when a sale goes south, when it doesn't close, I'd love to know I know you're not a litigation lawyer,
right,
but you're definitely asked the question. I explain to my agents it's so important to keep detailed notes, to keep your files, keep everything in line, because even if it's not your fault, because we're insured, you are going to be named. 100% they're going to come after you.
They might.
So what is the process? You're representing a seller. The deal goes south. What's the first step for that seller?
Well, generally what happens is we oftentimes get wind of it not till very late, just before closing.
Right. Surprise.
Yeah, surprise. It could happen on the day of closing. Yeah. Usually, if they're going to bail, they will bail earlier. We'll get wind of it typically from the agent.
Right.
But typically, the buyer's lawyer will say
here's a heads up.
Yeah, if they're a good lawyer and they want to cooperate, and I've been in this position, so I'm not out to get anybody. But if I get wind that my client, the buyer, can't close, I'm going to probably call the other lawyer and say, we may have a problem. I'm not saying we're not closing. I'm just saying I'm giving you a heads up.
Right.
So, and I want to know, what is your client, the seller, doing? Because if they are buying on the reliance on their sale, it's even uglier. Mm-hmm. So we get wind of it typically late, and it's unfortunate because the seller has no idea, and then as the lawyer, we have to call the seller and say, we just heard that your buyer may not be able to close. We go into protection mode because we have to protect our clients. So my policy is that if a buyer's lawyer calls and says, we need an extension, he calls me, I'll say, that's great, put it in writing.
Yeah, give us
because I want it on the record.
Yeah.
And then I want to know, how much of an extension do you need? Because in some cases they may only need a couple days. Mm. And I'll probe a little bit, saying, what's the issue? Do you have a mortgage?
It's an instant red flag for you, though.
Yeah, it's an instant red flag. And then we have to go into protection mode and get instructions from our client and say to the seller, okay, they need 3 days. No big deal. Do you want to give them an extension? Now, I always encourage people to give an extension, but you don't want the deal to fall apart. But there'll be additional costs, which they'll have to pay. Now, if they, in the situations where we had in the summer where they basically say, we can't close.
Right.
It's a completely different situation because then there's some legal ramifications of them saying they can't close. Well, then we just say to a seller, "What do you want to do?"
Right.
And then you get into the discussion of what happens to the deposit. Are we going to tell them to relist the property?
Right.
And then typically we will, oftentimes if we have to, we'll get litigation lawyer involved, and then we'll say to them, you need litigation advice. We can kind of coach them because we know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But if it goes to litigation, we're out. We've papered the file correctly, and then the litigation lawyer takes over. And we had a couple this summer that I think they went to litigation, but they ultimately got resolved because the property was resold.
Resold, sure.
No, it was resold for less, and then the seller has to decide, what do they want to do?
Right.
Do they want to go after that buyer? And that's a discussion with their litigation lawyer because, getting a judgment against somebody for $200,000 is great, but if they have no assets,
they can't pay it.
What's the point?
Agreed.
Right? You're just throwing away money.
So, I think there's also some confusion on the agent side. So, buyer comes to you, says we can't close.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not closing. The mission is the agent's like, we got to get this house back on the market ASAP. Mm-hmm. Wait, can we put this back on the market without a mutual release? Can we do like there's a whole host of questions then from the listing agent side.
Right.
So what happens there? They're contacted saying, okay, they're not closing, we got to sell the house again.
The most important thing the agent should do is probably clam up. Don't say anything. Mm-hmm. Speak to the lawyer because you could say the wrong thing.
Of course.
Take instructions from the lawyer. The lawyer will tell you what to do. Should we relist it? Should we do this? Should we do that? Just do nothing. Let us handle it. And really, obviously the agent has a vested interest in serving their client, but they should not go into the legal realm of things and try to give advice. Stay out of it. And I think it's better they stay out of it because
keep your mouth shut.
You can only really hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Stay out of it. Let the lawyer deal with it, because you could say the wrong thing and really prejudice your client.
For sure. What is a mutual release? Obviously, okay. So let me paint the scenario for you. We go through this process. Buyer doesn't close. The lawyer advises to relist the property. You relist the property, you sell the property again, mm-hmm. but you have never gotten a mutual mm-hmm. release from the first buyer. Mm-hmm. Can the first buyer then come back and say, well, no, I have an agreement to buy this house?
They could, but if it was done properly, the lawyer for the seller would have, if this was what the client wanted, would have terminated the deal and said, you're in default, right? And then, it shouldn't really, the seller shouldn't be precluded from, in fact, they have an obligation. Once the deal has been terminated, they have an obligation to put that property back on the market right away and mitigate their damages. So a buyer, they can try to come out of the woods, but the argument will be, you didn't close, we terminated the deal, we did what we had to do, we relisted it, resold it. It's probably not going to ever happen.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But I've also seen situations where you get zero cooperation from the buyer that's in default.
Yeah, I've not seen that because what generally happens is when the buyer goes into default and they've got a $100,000 deposit, they want their $100,000 deposit back, and they're going to do everything to say, can we get our money back? And that's where you need a skilled lawyer who can negotiate and say, okay, well, I would counsel a client and say, don't sign a release. Let's see what you can get for the property. Mm-hmm. If you can get the same amount, that will impact your decision in terms of if you're going to release them and how much. Mm-hmm. We had one, I think, over the summer where I think they were very fortunate in that they didn't close. There was like a $100,000 deposit. They ended up reselling it for the same price, which was surprising. So really, what was the seller's damages? Well, they had carrying costs, they had legal fees. Damage. So we said to the seller, do you want to go to court? Do you want to sue them? And they said, no. It was an elderly person. They said, we don't want any more aggravation or stress. So we said, well, why don't we just penalize them for your carrying costs, your legal fees? So it really amounted to $10,000 or $15,000. And the buyers were more than happy because they thought they were losing $100. Yeah. And they said, we'll give you 10 or 15, no problem. Mm-hmm. And it worked out well.
Yeah, escaped.
Yeah.
Heading into tougher economic times, you think we're going to see a lot? Have you been seeing fraud? Have you come across any fraud cases yourself?
Just reading about it this morning. The title insurance companies are really concerned about fraud because they're the ones that typically get hit with the fraud. So their underwriting practices have really cranked things up. There's definitely indicators of fraud on a lot of deals that they're familiar with and I'm familiar with. So they ask a lot of questions. I mean, identity fraud and identity theft is a big one. What I was reading this morning is that the latest trend is, properties that are rented or properties that are vacant. They target those because they're easy. You're renting out your house. You're living abroad, and your tenant steals your property.
Right.
They're becoming so sophisticated. These fraudsters.
I was reading an article about a guy. He wasn't an agent, but he was connected to an agent of some kind. And they had a property that was vacant, hadn't closed yet on a sale. And this guy leased out the property 10 different times, got deposits,
Yeah.
It's scary.
It's scary. It's very scary. I mean, that's why, you want title insurance on all your deals.
sure.
We don't close without it.
Yeah.
We won't close a deal without it.
And the reality is there's I don't know if you're aware of this, but about 2% of the agents we say make 98% of the money, right? There's so few agents that do a lot of deals. So there's a lot of agents out there that when they get the opportunity, they're so desperate for
a deal.
the deal. They want to believe this is their chance. They want to do a good job, and they're such an easy target.
They are
for fraud. So you got to be super, super careful out there.
Absolutely.
So obviously not any of our agents, because we're awesome and the best, but what kind of pet peeves do you have? If you had a complaint that you would file about agents, what would be your biggest complaint?
I guess, generally speaking, not going over the entire agreement with the buyer or the seller. Just really focusing on the big things.
Nobody reads anymore.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
Skip all the pre-printed stuff. Just hit the Schedule A.
Not even the pre-printed stuff. You really can't expect them to explain that. But I'm talking about the schedules.
Yeah.
The most important thing is, okay, how much should I get? What's my deposit? What's my closing date?
And let's talk about these 3 clauses.
Yeah. And how much commission are you charging me?
Yeah.
Those are the issues. But what about all the schedules where, there are things in the agreement that could come back and bite them that they haven't really addressed with their seller or their buyer? So that would be one pet peeve. Another one that even yesterday came up is buying and selling on the same day. It creates so many problems. And an inexperienced agent, because you've got buyers. Think about it. How often does the typical person buy a house? Every 5-6 years?
Maybe.
They don't understand the process, and they're relying on their agent for expertise and advice. So you got the agent saying, "Oh, don't worry, we do it all the time.
Sure.
We can sell and buy in the same day.
And let's buy and sell on the same day on a Friday."
Yeah, before a long weekend.
Before a long weekend.
It creates so many problems, potential problems for lawyers, because the clients don't understand what goes on behind the scenes in a closing and the delays that can happen. So,
the domino effect.
It's a domino effect. Like when I've got a client who says I'm going to be buying a house. I want you to be my lawyer, and we're going to be selling. I'll say to them, okay, I'm just giving you some advice. Don't buy and sell on the same day if you can avoid it. Now, sometimes it's unavoidable, but then I go into a whole spiel about, well, this is what could happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm warning you right now. This is why you shouldn't do it if you can avoid it. And most people don't. Do it.
Yeah, this comes from experience on the agent side.
Yeah.
I never close on Fridays. I try my best never to close on Fridays.
That's good.
I try my best never to close, buy, and sell on the same day. I always advise against it. But like you said, most agents, particularly newer agents, they are not going to know that. And when they finally get to a deal stage, they're just going to be so excited to do a deal. They're not really going to care about that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what can be done with our education system. Getting licensed, the process of getting licensed has come a long way from when I got my license to where we are today. And there's excellent elements about it, but it's missing the realities of the business.
Yeah.
Right?
Things you only learn when you do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so many brokerages out there that have so many agents.
I know.
It's impossible to... everybody does the best job they can, but it's impossible to convey little nuances like that.
You're right. And I think it's really incumbent on the broker, the manager to, like you do, have education sessions. Have people, not only lawyers, have people from the finance side, home inspectors, all of these sessions that really agents should attend. Like, when I do my seminars, I always find it's the same agents all the time. And even the broker or manager will say the ones that aren't here are the ones that should be here.
Of course.
So
Always.
I mean, if you want to become, better informed, better educated, you need to put yourself out there and get to these seminars and do and learn as much as you can, because being a real estate agent, it may not be difficult to get licensed, but it is extremely difficult to understand all the nuances that you talked about. And you can only do that by doing it and learning, having a mentor. It's so important because it's a tough job. I know it is. It's a very tough job.
Exceptionally tough job.
Yeah.
I plan on having all white hair within the next year or so.
Yeah.
I got one last question.
Sure.
In the U.S., you see a lot of full-stop shops where lawyers are actually right in the real estate brokerage. How come we don't have that in Canada? How come we don't have one-stop shops? I mean, I know the way title is transferred is different in the U.S., but you don't see that in Canada.
You mean where a lawyer is parked in the real estate office?
In the office, they handle the entire transaction as part of the overall package.
I've seen it in some situations. I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, I don't know if it's really necessary now in the electronic age we're in, where everybody is so accessible, 24/7. I mean, I think I'm pretty accessible compared to most lawyers. You can always get me. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I have heard of situations where lawyers will park themselves in a real estate office. There's no real reason why you can't.
Yeah, but they're actually part of the company.
You mean
they're employees of the real estate brokerage?
I don't know.
You think we could head in that direction at some point?
Possibly. Who knows where the future's going to take us in this industry?
Well, that's my leeway into. Do you have any thoughts on where this industry is headed as a whole, from the real estate brokerage side to the legal side, like 10, 15 years from now?
It's so hard to predict. I mean, technology plays such a huge part in where we're going.
Yeah. As much as it does, though, I have found that the basics and the hands-on personal side has only grown by leaps and bounds. We talk about our industry being ripe for disruption, and
I've been hearing that for years.
Right? And it's coming on the tech side. It's coming.
Yeah.
What I've seen in the 20 years I've been in this business, it hasn't come from the tech side. It's come from the level of service we now provide, and so much more hands-on. Before we started filming, I was talking about how much this industry's changed, and now we're we're doing a podcast right now. I have to do that as part of my job.
Sure.
We have to be content creators. We have to be stagers. We have to be designers. We have to be lawyers. We have to be movers, handymen, everything.
Yeah.
I mean, we make a lot of money when we do a deal.
Yeah.
We should provide as much service as possible. I think what the public doesn't understand is that the vast majority of agents work months without a paycheck.
I know.
And lose and lose and lose and lose before they get a win. Most of the public is only concerned with what they're paying. They don't recognize a lot of the times the service that's provided. But the disruption hasn't come from the technology. It's come from the level of service we're providing.
And I think, you're in a service industry, and that's, I mean, as an agent, what's going to separate you from your competition is the service that you provide.
100%.
Is it going to be just selling the house? Or are you going to set them up with a home inspector, a stager, a lawyer, a finance professional? Because you've got to provide that value-added service because they're going to require it.
100%.
They're going to require it. And I think... it is. I mean, it's a tough industry. How many real estate agents are there in?
60,000 in Treb.
Yeah.
60,000.
That's crazy.
I was looking through the stats with one of my agents the other day. I think over 30,000 do 0 deals a year. And then the next highest percentage is 1 deal or less a year. So it's brutal out there.
Well, the barriers to entry are just not high enough. That's the problem.
Correct.
And
everybody has the assumption they will come into the business.
Yeah.
Their cousins, their
fortune.
brothers, their
Yeah.
friends will use them and
Yeah.
they'll make a fortune.
Yeah.
And then they get that slap in the face. I tell agents when they're starting, you're not in the real estate business. You're in the you business. You have a service to sell.
No.
That service is selling properties. And if you can't get clients, it doesn't matter if you're the best agent in the world. The first job is to get clients. And they have to know that. And they build that business by offering these services, by offering the best professionals, by offering the best advice.
Yeah.
So
It is a tough job.
it's brutal.
I can't imagine, particularly in the market we were in, where there was multiple offers.
Yeah.
You've got clients, you drive them around, you show them 20 properties, you don't get any of them,
Yeah.
and then they say we're going to switch agents.
Ugh.
That must be just heartbreaking and devastating.
It's the worst.
It is.
Worse than that is, you're sitting in your office one day and the phone rings and you see it's your first cousin. And you pick up the phone and they're like, hi, so-and-so, listen, I just want to let you know that we've sold our house.
I know where you're going with this.
Oh, my God. It's like, really? You couldn't even call me? You've asked me? It's brutal.
Yeah.
And it takes, I would say, 10 years to learn to depersonalize that and not be crushed for weeks over it.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's tough. Anyways, Lorne, I want to thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
You okay if I share your phone number?
Absolutely.
With everybody?
The website, the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can reach Lorne at 416-225-5136. His email address is lschuman@schumanlaw.ca, and the website is schumanlaw.ca. I really appreciate it, Lorne. Agents, this is the man to call when you've got questions. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.